Okay, Be'ezrat Hashem. So we continue. Pasuk Gimel. Pasuk Gimel. So, as we mentioned in the beginning of Shiurim, the Gaon explains that the first 6 Pesukim are the introduction to Mishlei. Yes? We know that the book is broken into 3 portions. The first 10 chapters, then from 10 to 25, 25 to the end, which is Torah, Musa, and Mitzvot. Chokhmah, Musa, and Mitzvot, or the Torah in the sense of practical Torah. And that the first 6 Pesukim are an introduction, yes, to what the Mishlei is about. So, in Pasuk Gimel, the Pasuk says the following: Lakachat Musar Askel, to take intelligent Musa, like conclusions. Tzedek, in this context, the Gaon suggests means kindness, umishpat, and being just, umeisharim, and being balanced. What's very interesting is that there is a difference between Pasuk Bet and Pasuk Gimel. 2 differences. Difference number 1, in Pasuk Bet, he says, La da'at chokhmah Musa, to know wisdom and Musa. In Pasuk Gimel, he says, La kachat Musa, to take Musa. So 2 differences. Difference number 1, La da'at versus La kachat, knowledge versus owning, taking. And difference number 2 is that in the second pasuk he says chokhmah umusar, wisdom, chokhmah and musar, and in pasuk Gimel he only says musar. He says musar askel. Good. So the Gaon explains that, as we know, the book is broken into 3. Again, we're going again. Into 3 portions: Chokhmah, Musa, and Mitzvot, and Torah, right? So he says, before you engage with practical actions, first you have to know. You need knowledge. Yes, we know that Na'aseh v'nishma. Yes, we know that the practice is the most important. But you can only practice what you know. If you don't know, what can you practice? Right? So, in the beginning, the beginning of the tachlit, right, of the purpose of this book is what? La da'at chokhmah umusar. So the engagement of the purpose is la da'at, to know chokhmah, to learn, to master, to understand chokhmah and musar. But right away, for what purpose? La kachat musar. You need to take the musar. It's not enough to just know the knowledge and the musar. It's in order to take the musar, which is this, and not just a musar askel. And we're going to explain what musar askel means in a minute. And what is this musar askel? What is it made of? What does it represent? To take musar, and we know, we explained in the last shiur that musar means practical changes in your behavior based on what you have learned, right? So we have the chokhmah, that is the assessment of the situation, knowing the yetzer hara, knowing your weaknesses and your challenges. The musar is applying techniques that the Torah teaches you, the Chachamim teach you, in order to change yourself, right? And we said that musar means or asur, or something that is forbidden, that is restricted, or some from the word yisurim, something that the pain, right? So lakachat musa, you have to apply it, you have to imbibe it, right? Absorb it in order to change. And what is this? Tzedek u'mishpat u'meisharim. It's made of tzedek, mishpat, u'meisharim. And we're going to explain. Okay. Musar Askel. What does it mean, Musar Askel? So the Gaon suggests it's based on the pasuk Vayhi David lechol derachav maskil. It's one of the minhagim that we say it Motzei Shabbat when we do the Havdalah. We say this pasuk Vayhi David lechol derachav. David is in all his way maskil. Maskil means knowledgeable, but it really means successful. Successful. When we say Musar Haskel means to have success, to have productive changes and positive changes through your Musar. Musar Haskel. So when Shlomo HaMelech says, Lakachat Musar Haskel, it means to apply the Musar in a way that it has a positive and productive change in your behavior. Musar Haskel. So first you have Ladat Chokhmah Musar in the second pasuk. You absorb, you get the knowledge, you understand, assessment. Now you apply the Musar, but it has to be Musar Askel, right? That's the whole tachlit of the book. Right now, what are we talking about? Now, what Shlomo HaMelech is telling us, you want to know what the purpose of this book is, right? So we're still in the purpose of the book. After Ladat Chokhmah Musar is Lakachat Musar. Lakachat, to take, to internalize, to become one with the Musar that you learn in order to have a successful outcome, a positive outcome, to feel better, to feel that you're growing, that you're becoming a better person, a closer person to Hashem. And how do we do it? Through Tzedek, Umishpat, Umesharim. Through these three vectors, Tzedek, Mishpat, and Mesharim. And we're going to explain. Mesharim. We're going to explain. Okay. The Gaon tells us that when HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world, he created the world in a very balanced and equalized ecosystem world. Okay, there's a balance to everything, and if there is a change in the balance, it drifts and changes the entire world. It's the sword, we're not going to, but the sword of the Otiot Emesh. If you go to fundamentals, we speak about it. The Sefer HaYetzirah addresses it a lot at length. The letters Aleph, Mem, Shin. Anyway. Says the Gaon the following. based on, it says, Shlomo HaMelech is coming to teach us that if you want to have Musar and apply it properly, you need to have three things. You have to be agile, okay, and able to apply three different behaviors. One is called tzedek. Tzedek, he says, is chesed. Tzedek represents the right. Chasadim, kindness, softness, sweetness. As he says, if you only do chesed and tzedakah, and that's all you know, is no good. The world was not only built on chesed, it was built on chesed and on judgment, on din. So you also need the left, you also need the din, which is the mishpat, judgment, justice. He says sometimes you have to be tough on yourself to overcome your weaknesses, but also sometimes tough with people when they drift or they are reshaim or they do the wrong things. Sometimes you need to be tough. And then you have the balance, the middle. Meisharim. Meisharim is the balance. The memutza. What's in the middle? It says these are the three, if you will, the three vectors that a person must use in his life. When you take Musa, when you learn Musa, you have to know how to apply it. Or you apply it, or you behave with chesed and tzedakah, or you behave with strength and judgment and toughness. And most of the time, he says, most of the misharim, al pi rov, most of the time you have to be balanced. Okay. He says you need to be able to be using one of the three vectors at all time, depending on each and every situation.
Michelin comes from Yashar, from
Ken,
the way.
Yes, nachon, straight. Akavana in the middle, right? Now the Gaon tells us something interesting. He says that you should know that in those ways that are called Chokhmah, Musa, and Torah or mitzvot, like we say it, okay. In each one, there are four different elements. So in Chokhmah, we're going to find four hidden elements that we're going to address at the right time. In Musa, we have four elements that are hidden also in the category of Musa, and in the category of mitzvot or Torah, practical Torah, there's also four. It says that represents the three avot: Avraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov. Avraham Chesed, Yitzhak Gevurah, Yaakov in the middle, right? And if you take those three and you apply to each four, it's 12 is Yud Bet Shevatim, the 12 Shevatim. So he says with what we're going to be learning has a direct connection with the avot on one end, and then it's going to break down into the different types of Shevatim and the different types of versions or elements that comes out of each av. So he says, לקחת musar, ולקחת musar. Now we're talking about the musar, right? He says, inside the musar, we found for now three. Yes? What did we find? We found Tzedek, Mishpat, and Mesharim. Where is the fourth one? He says the fourth one is the Musar Haskel, that although represents a title, but it is in itself also a koach. It's also a vector. So it's three that are really four, right? The way we explain Lakachat Musar Haskel, right? How do you apply a musar that is productive and makes you grow and become a better person, right? What's the definition? We said it's tzedek u'mishpat u'meisharim. But says the Gaon, inside the Musar Haskel, there is also a koach. There is also an element. And that element, he finds it in Yeshaya. And the pshat means kol ma'agal tov. Tzedek u'mishpat u'meisharim kol ma'agal tov. That's what the pasuk says in Yeshaya. כן. ושופט בצדק גדלים והוכיח במישור לאן וארץ. That's the pasuk. So, back that. Here. And in Mishlei פרק ב' פסוק ט', אז תבין צדק ומשפט, אוקיי? ומשרים כל מעגל טוב. אוקיי? כל מעגל טוב. That's in Mishlei ב' פסוק ט'. Says the Gaon Mivilna that in the word Musar Haskel, which means, in the definition of Musar Haskel, which means a successful application of the Musar in your behavior, it comes with tochacha. You have to be critical on yourself. Tocha, on yourself or on others. Sometimes you have to know how to say critics when you love people, right? If you don't critic something they do, if you don't critic a child or somebody that you love for doing something, that means you hate him, you don't like him. If you love the person, you'll tell him, hey, wake up, you're doing something wrong. So says the Gaon, now we find four. We found tochacha, right? To be critical. We find tzedek, which represents the chesed. We find mishpat, which represents judgment, rigor, to be rigorous. And we find meisharim, which is the balance, right? Between both. These are the prerequisites for Musa to have the proper outcome on your behavior. We learn Musa, we try to change. In what sense? In a sense that the Musa helps you in your chesed when you need, helps you in your judgment, and in your deen when it's needed, helps you be balanced and in equilibrium most of the time. And all this through what? Through a constant tochacha, through a constant critic of yourself. So although it's one element which is called to be critic, to have, to be critical, but it's critical in every aspect, right? So it's one element, but it's the element that you find on all three. And this is what grants the person the blessing of lakachat Musar Haskel, to be successful. Like the pasuk says, "Vahi David lechol drachav maskil." David HaMelech was successful in all his endeavors.
Yes.
Endeavors because of that. That's what Musar Haskel is. Now, the Gaon takes the opportunity in this pasuk to address at length for the Gaon what the Rambam addresses in the 8 chapters of the Rambam. And he says, why does Shlomo HaMelech tells us that if you want Musa to be effective, when you sit down, we learn Musa. Yeah, you want Musa to change you, right? That you need the tzedek, the mishpat, and mesharim, all umbrella with tochacha. He says because when you work on yourself, and now we're in the category of Musa, we're not in the category of Chokhmah and not in the category of Torah or mitzvot. We're in the category of Musa. It says when you apply Musa, okay, you have to be able, or on yourself, to be tough or to be extremely soft. Each person, depending on their wired DNA, spiritual, emotional DNA, they have different challenges, right? So for someone that is too tough, we're going to tell them be on the opposite, be super soft, so that eventually you can come back to the middle. We've addressed it. We've spoken about it, right? It's called the golden path of the Rambam in Shmoneh Prakim. So he says, if you want Musa to be effective, you need to be able to be tough, to be soft, and to know what the middle means. The middle of the road means. It says, if the Musa doesn't help you get to that, it's not effective. You will not see success out of this limud of the Musa. What's interesting is that if we take a step out of the diving of the pasuk, what do we find? We first find Ladat Chokhmah Musa. So first we have the pasuk Mishlei, right? Pasuk 2, Ladat. Pasuk 3, Lakachat. Pasuk 4, Latet. Pasuk 5, Yishma, and then Lehavin, and then we can start Mishlei. Ma kavana? Ladat, first you have to absorb. Lakachat, internalize. Latet, once you internalize and you master, you can start giving. And only once you're able to give, Yishma, then you understand really what you've absorbed, what you thought you knew. Lehavin, and now apply it naturally. Yishma, to hear, but in a sense, Ishma is really Shamati, and Shomea Devarecha means I really understand. I understand in depth. I hear you. You know when you say that's what I say. I hear you. It's like I don't stop to the words. I understand the mashma'ut. I understand the depth, right, of of the knowledge I was exposed to. Lehavin, nani mevin. I understand. When you understand something, right, is that you can apply it naturally.
It's like when Abraham Shama et Sarah, right? He understood.
My kavana.
Wasn't it when Sarah told Abraham?
when he listened,
Yes.
we had to send
He
away,
said-
to send away.
And it was like, I accepted. He got it.
כן. כל אשר תאמר לך שרה, שמע בקולה. Listen to her. Exactly, the word שומע. כן.
לתת to give to others or to give to yourself?
Both. We're going to see. Bravo. Bravo. We're going to see. It goes in both ways. נכון? So, in that pasuk, Shlomo HaMelech emphasizes the importance also to see success in your effort to apply the Musa. Because if you don't apply it correctly, then you start resenting.
You get depressed.
Get
Always
depressed.
critical.
Exactly.
It's frustration
Frustration.
if you can't apply it correctly.
If you don't apply it correctly, then you start getting frustrated because it's not working.
And if you're not applying it correctly, is it because you didn't really internalize the Musa?
Could be many reasons. Could be many reasons. But what he's saying, right? He's not telling you what does it mean not to apply it correctly or to apply it incorrectly. It tells you how do you apply it correctly, because applying it not correctly could come from many different reasons. So Shlomo HaMelech tells us that when you talk about Musa, you have to be very careful to identify the positive outcome of your efforts in the Musa. Apply the outcome, acknowledge the outcome of the positive outcome of your efforts, and its purpose not to be stuck in your instinctive ways and think that your way is the right way just because it sounds good or because it's a good midah that is spoken about in the Sefarim. Meaning, you cannot be, like we said it many times, right? Your yes is worthless unless you can say no. It's only once you can say no that your yes has value, right? So the same way, you have to be able to be tough, you have to be able to be kind, and you have to mostly be always balanced, This is a successful Musa.
It goes back to the original conversation, the intro of Mishlei, about the mem, that Shlomo was always in the center, right? Because you can always relate to every midah.
Yes. But if you're not in the center, again, and we spoke also about the contrast, right? Of on one hand, he was the most mushlam, right? The 15th generation. On the other hand, he also the crack at the beginning of the end, right? So what do we see? We see the two opposites, right? And you need to be aware of the opposites in order to know, first of all, where to go in order to fix and where to bring back yourself in the middle, right? So the definition of a successful musar is this, is agility, acknowledgement of the opposites, and the ability to make a change and acknowledge the positive outcome. This is a successful Musa. And then obviously he refers again at length for the Gaon, to Rambam also bring to the Shmone Prakim le Rambam. But if you're too much of one, you have to go to the other. And then once it becomes almost natural, then you have to go back into the middle. Yeah, this has been discussed many, many times in different shiurim. So that's lakachat. That's lakachat. Ezrat Hashem. Tov. Next year we're going to learn pasuk dalet. לתת לפתאים עורמה לנער דת ומזימה. So right now we're still in the tachlit, in the purpose of this book. The purpose right now of this book, we have the first 6 pesukim, right? So this verse is like that, but not there, because the most important is what? Is lakachat, right? Is action. The most important is action, not just knowledge. The knowledge is important so that you can apply, right? But the purpose is what is lakachat, to do. Bezrat Hashem. So that's for pasuk gimel. Okay.